MacVoices is supported by iChart Magazine, putting Apple and tech news in focus. Subscribe in iTunes or find out more at iChartMag.com. And by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to MacNotables on MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it feels good again. It feels like we've got the band back together again. So for the first time in a long time, a multiple MacNotables. So let's just dive right in. Going from left to right on my screen, first up, Mr. Adam Engst. Adam, it's good to see you. It's been a while since you've been here, even just solo.
I would beg busyness. There's been a lot going on, and Apple doesn't make it easy to get away. I blame Apple entirely, by the way, just so we're clear on this. It has nothing to do with anything that might be going on here.
Okay. All right, good. Well, it's good to have you back. Next up, Mr. Andy Ihnatko, it's even been longer for Andy. Andy, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Well, I mean, since it's come up, I haven't been on in a while because I was informed through a third party that there was a discrepancy in our compensation packages. So let's not get into that. I'm back today.
Okay.
I'm hoping this will open the door to a conversation. Whether this conversation is fruitful or not, let's wait until that conversation happens. But for now, great to be back.
We'll work out something. Last but absolutely not least, Mr. Jason Snell. Jason, it's great to see you again as well. This is, I think you were the most recent returnee of the three.
Yeah, we talked not too long ago. It's a pleasure to be here, and as long as I get paid $1 more than Andy, I will be fine.
Oh, that doesn't put me on the spot at all.
I'm perfectly happy to take my compensation in, say, watches.
Yeah. Well, and I should point out a couple things. First of all, I'm Chuck Joyner. I'm the host of Jason Snell's podcast. We have rotating hosts, but he's always the guest, so that's always fun. And I should also blame Jason and Adam because they are the two responsible for me wearing one of these. At Macworld this year, they convinced me to go the Pebble route, which I did. And so that's where we're going to start our discussion of smartwatches, is the Pebble, some of the developments that have happened with it recently, and then where it fits into the smartwatch hierarchy, if there is such a thing yet. I don't know. Is there one, guys? I don't know.
Well, it's a little random at the moment, but...
Yeah, this isn't just preseason baseball. This is when everybody's on the field and no one knows who's playing cricket, who's playing rounders, and who's just passed out in the sun. It's so early in the development of this category.
Okay, so let's start with this way. Right now, I am wearing my Pebble watch on a regular basis. It's pretty much my daily watch, no matter what attire I have. Is anybody else wearing their Pebble watch on a daily basis?
I am.
Jason?
I am not, but it's not really the watch's fault.
Okay.
So,
well,
and
whose fault is it, Adam?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, so
here we go. Blame Obama. Let's hear it, Adam.
I couldn't get through to the website, man. So I mean, the basic problem is that, and perhaps I should rephrase that. The Pebble doesn't do enough that my phone isn't close enough at all times when I'm home. Well, I tend to wear the Pebble when I go out, but because I work at home, I don't go out a whole lot. And so I wear the Pebble whenever I go somewhere where it will be useful to not have to pull my iPhone out, or where it would be awkward, or where, like I want to get notifications in the car without having to, go find the iPhone and see what it says, that kind of thing. But so as a daily basis, no. And similarly, my other pseudo-smartish watch, the Garmin 620, I wear when I'm running or riding, but not around, because otherwise it just tells me my time.
Okay. Andy, you were the only person that said no with no qualifier. You're just not using the Pebble at all at this point?
No. I mean, I wore it for about a month, actually almost 2 months nonstop. because especially with a device like this, you just have to have it in your life and see how long you just naturally gravitate towards it. And when you gravitate toward it, what do you do with it? And I had a lot of fun over the first week or two playing with different watch faces and looking for different software. But not long after those first 2 weeks, it truly was just a wristwatch. All I was doing was using it for the time. So I appreciate everything that makes it good and everything that makes it important. It's important to have not only a device that lasts for a full week on one battery charge, but also something that's multi-platform and something that's affordable. And that's two things. That's something that's finally come with this price drop to $99. But it wasn't until I started using the Moto 360 that I started thinking, oh, this is what this. I don't know if this is perfection in a smartwatch, but this is very much in line with what would get me to be a smartwatch wearer on a daily basis.
Okay. Jason, you showed up for this without wearing it, so you had to go get it. Does that mean that you don't wear it at home, or you just were hiding it?
Chuck, it means that I am a person who no longer has to see the light of day or interact with other people in any way, because recently I left my job after 18 years of working in downtown San Francisco every day. That request came from my employer. And so I am here at home, and I don't wear my watch like every minute of every day. When I go out and I'm out and about, I wear it. I don't always wear it when I'm at home. So I didn't have it on because I took it off when I got home, I think from picking up my son at school, and it just was not on at the time. But I generally, when I'm out and about, I wear my Pebble because it satisfies, to Adam's point, it satisfies my number one priority for a watch, which is it tells me the time. And it satisfies sort of my number two bonus priority, which is it pushes those little notifications to my wrist so that I don't have to see it, pull my phone out of my pocket. And whether that's walking down the street or talking to somebody or in a movie theater or whatever, being able to just kind of glance instead of doing something else. And in a movie theater, it's great because it's just, you would die if you took your phone. People would beat you to death if you took your phone out. So anyway, that's what it does. And it doesn't do a lot more than that for me. I use it with Runkeeper to measure distance on hikes and runs and walks and bike rides. And that's kind of fun too. But for me, really it's that it tells the time and also throws push notifications up into my face or onto my wrist instead of having me have to retrieve it. Because as I've said many times before, if wrists were really no less convenient than pockets, we would all still be using pocket watches. But wristwatches did catch on, and I think it's because of that little bit more convenience. I realize it's small, but there is more. So
I'm still waiting.
It tells the time.
I'm still waiting for the waistcoats with the little chains that we can put our iPhones on. I think that's going to be the next.
There's probably a case that comes with a chain.
I think there was a long nurturing backlash against the vest. That finally we were liberated as men from our vest. Although the ability to have something to hide our corsets was probably a good way to keep those things around. Though.
So you're saying we were divested of that, Andy, is what you're saying.
Hey!
Zing!
Okay, so I'm trying to get some ground rules here for the discussion. So Jason, Adam, you don't wear it around the house. Jason, you take it off when you come home. Andy, do you wear a watch typically? Just you put it on in the morning like I do, and you go?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't. I'm not. It's not like I'm slightly mystified by people who take pictures with their iPads, but I'm not mystified by people who don't wear watches. But I mean, I am the sort of guy who just likes to have a watch on his wrist at all times. Not even because even these days where, like Jason, I am professionally unemployed, also known as a freelancer. So there could be an entire day or two where I don't leave the house, but I still have this thing on my wrist because I like having it, and maybe part of it is routine, and it's the only nice piece of jewelry I actually own. So,
well, and I will say that prior to sort of in a previous life, like when I was a student, I wouldn't consider not wearing a watch every minute of the day.
Yeah. Just
wouldn't even consider it, because when you're in classes and you've got schedules to meet, it's just insane not to have that with you and to be able to glance at a moment's notice and go, oh, it's 2:08. We'll be getting out of school in 3 minutes now. So that mattered. And yes, I did have one of those little calculator watches. You could tap in with the point of your pencil or whatever. Oh, he's got it.
There it is.
Oh God, what a nostalgia! I don't want to interrupt you, but I dug this out for lots of other things I was talking about. But what a nostalgia rush I got, because this was something I wore every day in high school and mostly through college, and I just like it a lot.
All right, that's three of us here. Jason, did you have that watch?
Casio calculator watch?
Yeah.
Not only did I have the original, I had the all black Casio calculator watch on which you could play Number Invaders, as we called it, which was the worst version of Space Invaders ever invented. But then I followed that up because I wanted to be cooler with the Casio digital analog watch, which had not only the time in digital numbers at the bottom, but LCD hands that turned as if they were real hands. But no, they were not, I assure you, real hands. They were just little black lines on a very clever LCD screen. Because what would be cooler than digitally analog?
Well, I didn't want to brag, but this is actually Casio Watch Edition.
Yes, that's fancier than what I had.
I don't want people breaking in here, but
that's got the little Milano band or something.
Yeah.
Each one is CNC'd out of a 40-pound block of pure unobtainium.
So
I guess what I was getting at though is that we're a little bit of an unusual audience in the sense that we really all do work at home. But if I was working at a normal job where I had to, catch a bus, or I had meetings at specific times and things like that, damn right I'd have a watch on my wrist every day. The iPhone is great, don't get me wrong, but it's all too easy to not hit something timing just right, because you'd have to pull your iPhone out every 3 minutes to see, is the bus coming, is the train leaving, all those kinds of questions where you're just like, no, not here yet. Should be any minute now. And so, I do think that there's, a vast number of people out there for whom a watch really is still an everyday occurrence.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between these 24 to 48 hours where I never leave the house and those like maybe 8 days out of the month where it really is, got to get to the parking lot by 7. My train leaves at 7:22. I'm supposed to be in Manhattan by 10:10 because my meeting is at 11. And then, and that's when not just a watch, but even a smartwatch really starts to assert itself.
Okay. By the way, if anyone ever needed proof of just how geeky we are, that's it right there. 4 out of 4 with the Casio calculator watch, or some variation. So good job, guys.
Good job, Casio marketing team of the 1980s.
But to be fair, we all grew up with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I believe did have the phrase about how when humans still thought that digital watches were pretty cool. So
you never know when you're going to need to calculate something.
It just or a towel.
See, and for me, now that's really interesting. It wasn't the calculator function; it was the memory function, to have phone numbers and the alarm function that would remind me that I have to be at that class or I have to be at that appointment.
Well, that actually caused me to rebel against digital watches entirely, because the replacement for this watch, I think, was a Millennium Falcon wristwatch, which was. It was like, imagine a pocket watch, only the entire thing was shaped like a really nice die-cast model of the Millennium Falcon, and you had to push a button on the stem to make the dome pop up that would actually reveal the time. Loved it so much that after having it for a week, I went back to the store, bought a second one, and then bought a third one a month later when I saw one without the box on discount. And when the first one wore out, I started wearing the second one. When the second one wore out, like 2 years later, I decided I don't want to destroy the third one. And that's when I thought, I have not even looked at digital watches in like 4 or 5 years. I bet there is a digital watch now that will kill and cook your dinner in 20 seconds. They're so sophisticated. And when I came back and saw almost literally this, only with like 200 phone numbers instead of 50, that's when I went back to the store and said, okay, give me a Timex wristwatch that doesn't even tell me what the date is. I want analog. If you can find me a wind-up one, because this is ridiculous. I'm not going to support an industry that is afraid to evolve. And this is why I'm because there's something in me that really is hardwired to like to have useful tech on my wrist, even if it's sometimes ridiculous tech on my wrist. And so if you don't give me something that's really, really cool that way, I will have to go in exactly the opposite direction.
Andy, at the next show, you need to show up wearing your Millennium Falcon watch and your Millennium Falcon lapel pin.
But then the watch would be out of box and it would no longer be mint in box.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. All right.
Major foul, Chuck. Major foul.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot the whole mint thing. So Pebble seems to be their version of pushing their model forward seems to be now a health and wellness metaphor. They're partnering so that their watch can, I guess, partner with some of the fitness bands. And Adam, you're probably the guy to speak to this.
Jason, I think we're offended.
Hey. What?
What?
No, actually,
let me scroll back to that time last week when I actually met my step goal for the day. All right, mister?
No, only because Adam is a notorious runner. None of us are known for running.
What's he running from? That's my question.
Your problems are still right back there in the office, Adam. Right where you left them.
No, see, the problem is in fact, I don't use any of the fitness bands because there's a big difference between people who are interested in tracking their steps and people who are interested in tracking their runs. So I haven't the foggiest idea how many steps I take in a day. Just no clue. But if I go for a 5-mile run, I care how far I went, what pace I went. As I said, this Garmin 620 that I'm wearing on my right wrist. Actually, I have a heart rate monitor strap that will not only tell me heart rate, but it will also tell me ground contact time, stride length, vertical oscillation, and the whole thing will calculate my VO2 max on a real-time basis. See, you don't even know what that means, and that's fine. This is serious runner geekiness.
No, I like my VO2 to be maxed. I'll tell you that.
VO2 is so less.
And so the point being that like something that tells me that I've done 6,000 steps today isn't that great. No, really not interested. And so I actually haven't done hardly any kind of connection between the iPhone and sort of the Garmin. The closest is the 620 does Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And it will automatically detect my network and upload my data as soon as it gets back in range. And then it uploads it to Garmin Connect, and then Garmin Connect brings it over to Strava, and I can do even more mapping and that kind of stuff with the data there. So the kind of the level I'm at with smartwatches or kind of athlete watches is a different one. And keep in mind, I'm not even all that serious about that. You get the triathletes, and they care more deeply because they have to do swimming and biking as well, and they want power meters and cadence, stroke cadence, and all of those kind of stats. So this stuff can get really, really high end. Not so much in terms of expense, although they're not cheap, but in terms of the kinds of data that you're getting that's well beyond a Jawbone or a Fitbit or that kind of thing.
Jason? First of all, if I insulted you, I'm sorry.
I mentioned Runkeeper earlier, and that's an example where if I'm doing a run or a walk or a hike, especially if I'm with my kids and they're like, "How long have we been?" It's only been a mile. We got more to go. It's actually kind of nice to have that data reading out here. I think it's smart of Pebble to do this, of trying to get Pebble is trying to find ecological niches in which it can survive the onslaught of bright colored phones that are made by these enormous companies, and they can't compete with everything. I wrote a piece about this on 6 Colors yesterday, that they need to find little places to survive in. And I think their price, they cut the price of the basic Pebble to $99. I think that's great. I think partnering with fitness bands and trying to focus on fitness applications and using the sensors is smart, and maybe that's a place for them. The battery life certainly is a place where they're going to have a huge advantage over these other phones for a long time, because although their screen is black and white, it's this they call it e-paper, but that's just a brand name. It's not like e-ink on a Kindle. It's an LCD, like those Casio watches, except a little slightly better, not a lot better, slightly better. But it means that it'll last a week, and the other watches will last a day. So they've got advantages, and they need to find them. And if fitness is an advantage, if they're saying it's not just a watch but a fitness band all in one, maybe that's a way for them to survive. I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I'm looking at it more for battery life and notifications and just showing the time. But that's, if they can find a simple place, maybe they can make a go of it.
So did I just hear you say that this is a niche watch? I mean, could this be, I'm sorry, Pebble, because this is disparaging, but could it be a kid's smartwatch?
I don't know about that. I'm not sure its feature set is right for kids, but I think it might be something for people who don't want to spend a lot of money on these more expensive cutting edge watches, right? I mean, the Apple Watch is going to cost $350. These watches are not cheap, and so if they've got something for $99 or maybe eventually like $79 that lasts a week, that ties in with Runkeeper and your phone notifications and doesn't do a lot more than that, but I think there's a market for that because not everybody's going to want to buy a $350 fancy watch that is also brand new technology that is going to get better every year for the next 5 years before regular people want to use it,
and not waterproof.
Right, and the Pebble is what you can swim with a Pebble, and you can't with an Apple Watch. Let's say,
and even if you're not literally going to take it in the pool with you, just not worrying about it. I mean, a $350 watch, I'm going to take it off before I wash the dishes. Sorry, I'm not going to be careful. I'm not going to risk that. Whereas the Pebble seems to me to be, a bit more reliable and rugged in that sense.
MacVoices is supported by iChart Magazine, putting Apple and tech news in focus. Ken Ray, the brains behind macOS Ken, brings you iChart Magazine, a digital-only publication distributed through Apple's newsstand, where he delivers more in-depth coverage on the Apple news we all crave. Published Monday through Friday, it's the perfect way to get more of Ken's views and analysis on what makes the Apple universe tick. Of course, Ken doesn't stop there. He also covers tech news in general, but with an eye on how it affects you and me as Apple users and enthusiasts. And that's the difference. The iChart Magazine difference. Ken was my guest on MacVoices 14198 to talk about iChart Magazine, along with macOS Ken, iChart Radio, Day 6, and what keeps him going. Ken is one of my favorite Apple News junkies because of his unique combination of analysis and wit. iChart Magazine is your way to get his most in-depth coverage of our favorite computer company and everything that affects them. iChart Magazine, putting Apple and tech news in focus. Find out more and subscribe in iTunes and at iChartMag.com. Thanks to iChart Magazine for their support of MacVoices. Andy, could the Pebble develop a feature set, you think, given their hardware, given the theoretically limited amount of sensor technology that is in a Pebble, or at least this edition of Pebble, to survive and be a little bit more of a strong player instead of Jason's niche player?
I'm really not sure. I think the price drop is super significant because in almost every product category that I look at, in the back of my mind, there is a what the hell price level, which I define as once a tablet is less than $150. A lot of people who maybe were not interested in owning a tablet will say, "Oh, what the hell? For $150, sure, I can find a use for it." Whereas for $500, boy, they really have to make sure that this is going to give value for money. This is going to have to be something that I've got a role in my life all ready for this to fill in. And I think for $99, that's definitely the what the hell level for a smartwatch. And even at that level, if someone said, "Well, here's a $99 watch," and I can talk, if you've got only 30 seconds for me to tell you about cool features on it, and I have to pick one that might appeal to you. It's not just one watch, it's about 1,000 different watches, because whatever watch face design, whatever character, whatever design, do you want text, do you want analog, do you want Bart Simpson, do you want a Japanese character on it, do you want to have a notification of whatever your last Evernote was? Anytime you get sick of what you're looking at, every time you check the time, you can always change it to something else, and that will work that way for the life of this watch. You will never get bored. That's an interesting feature for a $99 watch. And if later on they come to appreciate how handy it is to, as Jason has it, to have notifications and text messages chimed all the way to your wrist, and if later on they discover that there are actually real apps that don't just tell you the time, don't just simply tell you the notifications, but kind of make this work like it was a real computer, that's nice too. So that's why I think this $99 price is a killer feature. It's not the desperation move of a company that wants to remain relevant. It's where you show up at the party wearing the clothes that you think are going to be appropriate for that. Then you look around, you see how everyone else is dressed, and then maybe you make an adjustment or two because you want to make sure that this is a room that you can still exist in. And the $99 price for the Pebble Watch means that this is a room they could definitely exist in, particularly after the news that the cheap Apple Watch will be $350. The least amount of money you can possibly spend on an Apple Watch is going to be $350. Okay, $349, but I'll keep the change from a $350 bill. And even these Android Wear watches are $250, which is a lot closer to reality for some people. And they're kind of trending downward as this is as Android Wear is going to be deployed on a different range of watches and different devices as they figure out how to make these things a little bit less expensive. So this is such a great move for Pebble. They don't really. It's a move where for $350, I'd better really know what this Apple Watch does. I better really know. I better have a list of at least 4 real problems that I have over the course of my day or my week that this watch is going to solve for me. For $99. I'll buy one for my dad for $99. I'll buy one for my friend for $99. And if I happen to have had a pretty good month, and I got this gig that I didn't know I was going to get, and they're going to be paying me X hundreds of dollars for it, and I've had my eye on a Pebble watch, sure, for $99, I'll buy a $99 Pebble watch. That's the power of that price point.
One thing that I think is actually important to call out here is that we say, oh, it tells you the time and you get the notifications. Notifications can actually be quite a bit more interesting than what you might think. So the killer app, so to speak, the killer notifications that I found with the Pebble was at Macworld, in fact, when we were walking around San Francisco. And I know San Francisco moderately well, but I still need directions. And so I had pulled up my iPhone and asked Google Maps for walking directions to some place that we were going. And I put my phone back in my pocket. And then we get to the next intersection and the Pebble buzzes and says, turn left on Harrison. Thinking, this is great. You know, all of a sudden you're in an unfamiliar city. You don't want to look like the tourist geek, kind of like this. You know, if nothing else, I mean, whether or not people are going to actually steal your phone, you look stupid. You don't have your head up. You're not watching the traffic or the people around you, anything like that. And often I actually find it a little bit hard to you know, I mean, the notifications help, but I find it a little hard to sometimes evaluate maps when walking. It's like I'm not sure what direction I'm going and not moving fast enough to see anything happen. So literally just walking to an intersection and being told to turn left or turn right on that street was brilliant. You know, glance, okay, turning left, walking to the next intersection, buzzes you again, turn right at the next intersection, go on from there.
Yeah, I think that's. I don't want to go into a long discussion about Android Wear unless Chuck wants to pivot this away from Pebble. But yeah, that's it. That's the reason why I really like the Moto, because it isn't just about notifications. It's about putting information on your wrist or putting a single solitary molecule of phone usefulness at the most useful place to put it. But no matter what the model of smartwatch is, you also hit upon one of the understated features and attractiveness of this watch is that think about how the role that the problems that a phone creates for women. Because I know a lot of women who like the iPhone 6 Plus or like the Galaxy Note 3, who like these large phones, but it's really difficult to find a place to be holding it or carrying it in a convenient place. The fact that this would be a second screen for that phone and let them access a lot of the functionality they need without having to take that phone out of a purse is a really, really big win. Some women are also very concerned about safety, about holding this this very expensive, very pricey, very showy device and walking around with it or walking around with it in a very visible place where it kind of attracts attention, perhaps unwanted attention. And this allows them to get the information and get the utility that they really want without having to really show what kind of a really expensive, cool phone they own.
Andy, I do want to take it not to Android Wear necessarily, but to a larger discussion. Can I ask you, though, to hold up your Pebble for a second?
Sure.
Because you have the steel.
Yes, and actually, there it is.
Yeah,
I've got a stack of watches here, so it was buried underneath the other ones.
So that's the steel, and that's the one question I have now. Adam, you make a fashion statement with a red.
Yeah, I went red.
Yeah, I went black. You know, Jason, you too.
Yep.
So I don't know. There's some kind of salute here going on. So there's a question here, I guess, about the fashion part. That, you know, let's face it. We do look like geeks. I mean, this is a black plastic watch, so it's not the kind of thing that I would choose if I were going to put on a suit and put on a watch with it. But there's enough function there for me to make the choice. Why did it take Pebble so long, and why haven't they leveraged that a little more and done the steel? Because that's not a bad looking watch. That's a decent looking watch that I would put on with anything. Yes.
I would just guess that it has to do with manufacturing is a lot harder than it looks. You can't just turn on a dime and say, "Oh, we're going to do this." And they had put a lot of effort into basically the original model. And they probably undoubtedly learned stuff. It was probably faster to do the steel, but it was, it's new materials, new machining, possibly different factories to work with. Who knows what the logistics were? But I think there was a great article about this. We were talking about how if you're used to Apple manufacturing, don't assume anyone else can do that. That Apple's scale and experience and all of these other variables, just the money they have, means that they can do things that no one else can. And so, I think it's deceptive sometimes because we're used to these, absolutely gorgeous, pieces of metal and plastic and glass that Apple puts out. But it's really almost not fair to compare what they can do to what anyone else can do, either in terms of quality or time to production.
Jason, how do you feel about the fashion aspect? How important is that for the Pebble and for everything else?
Well, you can see from me that I'm a fashionable gentleman. I think fashion is an issue for some people, and functionality is. And as we all have shown with our purchase of Casio calculator watches off into the future, that's not necessarily the highest priority for me. I obviously prioritize functionality. I don't want something that looks atrociously bad. I find the Pebble comfortable on my wrist, and I think it looks fine. It's a black blob. That's actually why I chose black, and I got a black leather band for it. Is like, to me, this reads as it's just a watch. It's just a blob. It doesn't call attention to itself. It's just there. I also have a Rolex. I have my dad's Rolex that he bought in the 60s. And if I want to go somewhere fancy, I will put that on and use that as a fashion accessory. And then I just deal with the fact that if the phone vibrates, I actually need to look at it. And but otherwise so different people are going to differ. I think when you start spending $350 on a product, you're more likely to want it to do broader duty and be able to be worn in a variety of environments. And I think that's one of the challenges of all these devices is, are you using them in a fitness context? Are you using them in a business context? Are you using them in a social context? And what does that mean? And how do people deal with it? I mean, I think Apple asked those questions, and that's why they made such a big deal about the swappable bands on the Apple Watch. Is I think they're trying to find a way through to say, well, what if I wear this? This is a great fitness device, but we also want it to be really popular with people as a fashion accessory. How do we do that? And they seem to have come upon this idea of, well, you can just change the bands and then they look totally different. I don't know whether that's realistic, but that seems to be their attempt to solve that problem.
And from what I've read, and you all, I think, well, I'm not sure who here has had their hands on one of those, but you're also going to be able to change the watch faces as well. So you really can give it a whole new look with a new band and program a new face in, and bang, you've got a new watch.
Yeah, I think that's also part of the design. It's not just like every watch that we've been holding up, all three of us have swappable bands, but the Apple Watch is designed so that if you want to swap the band because you're going out to a different, you're wearing it at work, but you're going someplace else at night, you can put the other band in your pocket and easily swap it out in the cab on the way to the Ministry of Nightlife. And so this is why a lot of people were complaining about, gee, it looks kind of plain, doesn't it? Well, that's the whole point. So that no matter what your taste is, it's bound to, it's the Jay Leno design. It's going to appeal to the broadest swath of people, and most people are going to be able to integrate it into their own personal style, and they can tailor it a little bit with these personalized watch bands.
One of the things that I'll be curious to see, we've seen a few articles on this already from people who actually are serious watch geeks, the people who have the boxes with the that keep their watches wound, and they've got whole watch collections and things like that. I'll be a little curious what they end up thinking and talking about with it in that fashion, because in some sense, we're really, again, not enough worried about it. Clearly, I mean, maybe you wear a suit to work, Chuck, but I don't think any of the rest of us wear suits more than a couple of times a year. And so, that's not going to be the kind of fashion conscious statement that we're going to need to make. But there are people who really do care about this and who put a lot of effort and money into it. And what will they end up saying and doing? Will the Apple Watch just be kind of a toy to them because they're used to these, mega watches from, Swiss manufacturers who've been doing it for, 250 years. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's the other mystery about this, because the more I try to look into what the watch market is, particularly the high-end watch market, which is where Apple wants to go, the more I realize that I am just not naturally, the path of my life has not led me to a place where I can understand someone who spent $1,000 on a watch, much less the many thousands of dollars that a solid gold watch is going to cost. So I don't know, do these people expect this, do they expect this to do more than just look pretty on the wrist? Are they going to expect this to look good in 10 years as opposed to 5 years? Are they so wealthy that they expect just this $5,000 watch, as expensive and beautiful as it is, to be part of a stable of watches that they own, and they will pull out this one only for situations where they think it's appropriate, and they'll buy a cheaper one for day-to-day use? This is why it's so hard for me to come up with any sort of a really confident opinion on what this strategy is going to bear out for Apple.
Yeah, I did a little post on Six Colors to a story that a guy wrote about riding in the Singapore Airlines suite class, and the point, I mean, it's ridiculous kind of airline porn in that it's just like when you're flying over the ocean in a double bed that costs $22,000 with a flight attendant who's just waiting outside to see if you're stirring, and if so, do you want a $500 chocolate bar and an $800 cup of cocoa that we will not be charged for? You realize that perhaps this is not a market that I can really comment on. Yes. Yeah, this is a guy who flew from Singapore to New York for roughly $17,000 US. And my point is, there are people out there who are playing a totally different game than the rest of us, and more importantly, there is a market for those people. And that's like, when we think about the Apple Watch Edition, when we think about how people might use these kind of products, it's worth keeping that in mind, that that may not be a product that sells a lot, but it may sell to a very, very high-end, Russian oligarchs, Emirates oil oligarchs, all the oligarchs with petroleum in their background.
It is worth pointing out that I think Jason's absolutely right, but there's a reason why they're called the 1%. There's only 1% of them.
Yeah, but they've got like way more than 1% of the money.
Well, they do, but how many Apple Watches is each one of them going to buy? I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is that Apple prices this too high. Might be a fine business, but it's not a mass business. It's not like the iPhone. It's not like the iPad.
But that's why there are more editions, right? That's why there's a $350 watch and an unknown, if you have to ask, you can't afford it kind of watch. And I would also argue that, I mean, nobody who's, and this is where the Apple Watch gets really tricky for Apple. And I know Andy and I talked about this a little bit on Twitter at one point. What's the brand promise of Apple? Is it affordable luxury or is it luxury? And you risk your brand being seen as being something out of reach of people and ridiculous, instead of something that they covet and they really love, if you go too far up that way. That all said, if you can sell if the profit margins on that 1%er watch are 100 times that on the 99%er watch, you're going to make your money. And what Apple's trying to do is both. And I think it's a really good question about whether that will succeed or not, and what that means about Apple's brand. But I do see that Apple Watch Edition as being something that is not meant to be affordable luxury. It is meant to be luxury. They want to capture those people who want the absolute finest and don't care that it's going to be obsolete in a year or two.
And it could be part of a very, very shrewd marketing decision where they don't expect to sell those let's pull a number out of a hat, $6,000 gold watches in any quantity. But think about how you see famous people, movie stars, football players, basketball players, musicians, wearing Breitling watches that cost about as much money. And it's not possible for any of their fans to own anything except for maybe a car window sticker with the Breitling logo on it. They can allow their movie star idol to wear the $6,000 watch, then that will influence them to say, you know what, I bet that if I save my pennies for a couple of months, I can buy the $350 version of this really expensive thing that my favorite basketballer has.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Yep, Smile makes all of those great products, but the one I'm most excited about right now is the brand new Text Expander Touch 3 for iOS 8. You may have heard Greg Scown of Smile talk about it on MacVoices 14.194. If you didn't, you should go back and watch that show to get the full feel of how excited Smile is to get this one out. Text Expander is amazingly useful on the desktop. It lets you type just a few letters or snippets in Text Expander speak and have them expand into tens, hundreds, even thousands of words automatically. And Text Expander Touch has been amazingly productive on the iPhone and iPad to a more limited degree until now. Before iOS 8, apps had to be Text Expander enhanced, where the developer of that app had to include Text Expander functionality in their app using an SDK from Smile. And there were plenty of those apps. More than 60 of the most popular text-oriented apps included Text Expander capability, and still do for those of you who haven't upgraded to iOS 8. But iOS 8 changes everything. Now, using the new Text Expander Touch 3 keyboard, you have access to the unrestricted power of Text Expander anywhere a keyboard is used. And, just like you would expect, you can sync your already created desktop snippets through Dropbox to use on your iPhone or iPad, so everything works the way you want it to everywhere. Text Expander Touch 3 is just $4.99 on the iOS App Store and is just waiting to make you more productive. It was my first purchase after updating to iOS 8, and it should be yours too. Text Expander Touch 3 from Smile, the makers of world-class software. Thanks to Smile for their ongoing support of MacVoices. Am I just flying my geek flag by saying that, well, first of all, let me back up. There's one more group of people, and that is the people and Dave Hamilton and Brian Chaffin are both two of them, who are absolutely fascinated by the mechanics of these things. They fully acknowledge that they're not as accurate as any small $10 Casio you can buy, but they love the intricacy, they love the engineering of them. So I don't think for those guys and people like them that it's all about the money or the cost. It's just about the item itself. Then you have the conspicuous consumption. The question I started to ask, am I the only one flying my geek flag? Because to me, it's not about how much it costs. It's what it does and what it does for me. And if it at $1,000, if it does something more than at $500 or more than at $100, then I'm going to assess the value of it. But just to say that it's made of this particular metal and costs this much money, that just doesn't appeal to me.
Well, then the $350 model is for you.
I actually really do agree, Chuck. And I mean, it's sort of an odd question in some sense for people like us. I mean, like the question of, will I buy an Apple Watch? The answer is yes. Not because I desperately want it or I think it will change my life or anything like that, but because I kind of need to know about it. It's what I do. And, and yes, I have the iPhone in my pocket all the time, so that will be not a problem. All those kinds of things are not an issue, but for me, it's research more than anything else. But I have a very hard time thinking of anything that any watch could do that would make it actually worth $350 to me, given the fact that I haven't been wearing a watch because I don't care about exact time for a whole long time. I'm not a watch guy. And, the iPhone, not a problem. I'm happy to pay, pony up my, $200 or $300, whatever it is, every couple of years to get the new iPhone because I can really, really see what it does for me. It changes the world. And I don't see the Apple Watch changing my world. Maybe I'll be wrong, and I'll find out when it comes out.
Yeah, I feel as though there's a lot of overlap between the problems of marketing a smartwatch, not just the Apple Watch, but any smartwatch, and the iPad, where I was bumping my head against this all the time. I'm sure everyone else in this conversation was too, because now I've used the iPad and now I have to explain to somebody else why this is going to be a useful thing, even though it costs as much as a decent notebook, even though it does not have a USB port, even though it does not have a slot, even though it does not have a keyboard, and it doesn't run any software of which you are familiar. It is, however, something where if you actually have the chance to use it for 5 minutes, you will understand why this is at least an intriguing product. If you have the chance to use it for an hour, then you will see, okay, this is why this had to exist, because there was a big, big gap in computing that needed to be filled by something exactly this shape and exactly this size. I'm finally getting around to writing my review of the Moto 360. And that's the problem that I'm facing today, where I can't, most people think, oh, well, that's the thing where you can swap out the faces, and you can, if there's a text message, it shows up on your wrist. I don't even want to get text messages at all. I don't know why I would actually pay money to have that put on my wrist. And I have to say, no. Think about it more philosophically. Think about all the reasons why you dip your phone into your pocket to take out you have to unlock your phone. You have to drill down into an app to do something that takes all of 5 seconds, but that is an Oreo cookie surrounded by 15 seconds of time that you don't realize how much time you're wasting until you're not wasting it anymore. The other analogy is the comparison to graphical user interfaces. When the first Macintosh came out, you could tell people why it's so cool, why it's so new, why it's so easy to use, and they'll say, "Well, look, I've got DOS, I've got my DOS machine, I've got my Apple IIe. Those work great. I love my Apple IIe. I don't know why I would want to spend another $1,000 on this thing that needs to swap disks every 5 seconds every time I do a search and replace." But then you don't realize how bad you had it until you get to try something different from that. And so it's add that to the long list of problems that come to make people aware of what this sort of does. And you're not wrong, Chuck. It's also the problem of trying to get people to buy something they don't need that costs a lot more than they can afford to lose.
Jason, what's the killer feature for a watch device? I even hesitate to say smartwatch because that almost biases it. So for a watch device, what is essential to put on your wrist other than the time, obviously?
Well, this is the issue. Is on one level, I think there isn't a killer feature. I think there are going to be a bunch of killer features for a bunch of different people. And that makes it harder to build these things, and it makes it harder to market these things because we don't really know what the killer feature is going to be. I think fitness is a nice feature, but I think the fitness bands, may have it covered. We'll see. I think, like I said, I like notifications. I think if everything is simple, there are, and this is something that we've covered before and that Adam and Andy have both talked about, the idea that something little, I think Andy said little molecules of features from phone apps that fly over to the wrist. If it's simple and it's useful, whether it's like Apple's watch description of doing navigation and telling you when to turn left and right silently just on your wrist when you're walking down the street, or I think little bits like that may turn out to be more popular with the general public than we think, but we don't know, and different people are going to react differently. And I think there's a real good chance that people who right now say, like Adam says, I don't really wear a watch, I don't see the need, and there's a whole generation of people, young people right now who don't wear watches. I think there's a chance, like maybe even a good chance, that there will be something compelling enough to put a watch on their wrist. And I think that's why Apple did the ridiculous thing where you can send your heartbeat to a friend. Is Apple is trying to think of all sorts of ways to personalize this and to sorry for the cliche, think outside the box with this thing of like, are there other features that we can roll in this that will that will catch fire and make people want one of these things? I think that's why Apple's Apple Watch event was so unfocused in some ways. Is this is a case where I think they want to have 100 small features and find out which 5 are successful. That is dangerous because that makes for an unfocused and potentially weird product. But I think that's where we are, is that there is no 1 or even 5 little mini features that are going to be the killer here. I don't think. I think it's going to take. I think the way people live their lives and use technology are just too varied to say, other than telling the time, why do I have this thing?
Yeah, and that's the other bit of overlap between the Apple Watch, for instance, and the iPad, where if you remember the iPad unveiling, they were very cagey. Apple was very cagey in their demo. They didn't want to send you away thinking about comparing this to a notebook because they knew that it would fail if you thought about it as a notebook. They didn't want people to think about it as an ebook reader because they knew it would fail if people thought about it as an ebook reader. They really wanted people to think about this as an iPad, and then they have to figure out for themselves what an iPad actually is. And just like seeing a work of somewhat abstract art, your own brain processes it and makes it a very personal experience, then figures out, oh, so this is what an iPad is. And there can be different answers for different people.
Well, and if you look at even the current iPad advertising, they've got like the doctor and the windmill and, all these things. I'm like, man, I just watched Netflix on mine. I feel like I'm not doing it right or something. But that's very much what Apple's trying to say. I mean, it turns out I'm not actually a big iPad user. That my Mac does pretty much all the things that I want to do, and I'm at it pretty much all day long. So, that doesn't change things. Where the iPhone really did change it. In terms of that was the different small screen that really was with me at all times when I wasn't at the Mac, whereas the iPad just couldn't move around. And so it's possible the Apple Watch, because it will be attached to me, and therefore will go wherever I'm going, that there will be those things that, oh yeah, it's really cool that I can at a glance see what the radar is looking like without having to pull my phone out for whether or not I'm going to get rained on in my run, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's another aspect of it. Just Sunday night, I attended a talk given by Tim Gunn from Project Runway, and he gave so many really good pieces of advice and just of knowledge about what fashion is. And he just comes back to the basic definition of what we wear is the message that we choose to send out into the world about ourselves before we even get a chance to talk to somebody. And that really is part of the problem and the opportunity presented by watches, because I'm perfectly I'm not even going to say that I'm not a fashionable person, so I don't care what I look like, and this is why I have no problem wearing this. To a certain extent, I kind of want to be that guy of the 3 people in my airline row who has something interesting on their wrist that is functional, that is not distracting, that clearly isn't there to inspire a conversation about, hey, what's that watch all about? But I'm perfectly aware that this is part of the message I'm sending to people, that I am the sort of person that, given the choice between a $1,000 really beautiful designer watch or just a really cool $200 watch, that electronic watch that does things that I find helpful, that this is part of my enjoyment of wristwatchery.
Andy, we said we weren't going to go down the Android direction, but you were flaunting your Moto. So,
was I?
Yeah. So
sounds slightly kinky somehow.
Yeah,
I got my Moto working.
Actually, give me the top 3 or 4 things that you find functionally appealing about the Moto.
I think that it really is, again, getting back into the iPad thing, it is not one specific thing. I'll give you a couple of specific examples after this, but the single thing I like most about it is conceptually they have taken the concept of a watch, a wristwatch, the traditional 100-year-old definition of a wristwatch, and let that guide every single decision they make about what this thing should do. When you think about it, from the very first wristwatch, and as I understand it, the World War I era, this is something where the job of the wristwatch is to give you one simple piece of information when you go like this. And for 100 years minus about a year now, it has been what is the time and what is the date. And now it's, well, what if we'll put a computer here that can bring you lots of information, but it is still going to be, I'm doing this because I want one piece of information, or I want one simple operation, such as I want to know for the way that the Android Wear works is that software that's on your phone, even software that's not specifically just wristwatch apps, can be judicious about when to put an alert or a little badge somewhere on your wrist. So, for instance, when I go like this, I want to know, okay, I know that is MacNotables tonight, is that 6:30 or 7? I go like this, and because I'm within about an hour or 2 of this appointment, there is a little card that simply says MacNotables 6:30, and then without touching it, I simply put my wrist back down again because it's there. When I had last time I was in New York a couple weeks ago for a meeting, I'm off of Amtrak. I know I got to walk about 10 or 15 blocks to get to this location. I don't know where it is, but because Evernote knows that, well, I attached a note to this appointment. Now it'll put this Evernote exactly where I want it to go, because it will have, here is the address of the meeting you're going to. As Adam said, if I were doing navigation, it would simply say, well, here is where you need to turn left or right. And it does this very, very well, in that I never really have to drill down to make that happen. It tries very hard to guess contextually what is the right thing to do. In a broader sense, and he said 2 or 3, so I'm going to go for number 2. And if you want me to go number 3, I'll go number 3. Number 2 is the concept of something that's very distinct from how Apple presented their watch, where they said, and here's a demonstration of how you can get access to every single photo you've ever taken with any iPhone you've ever owned, and look how we can scroll in, and now we can actually tap here, and now we can actually look at this picture, and that's a long time to spend doing this and doing that and looking at a tiny little screen. Whereas what the philosophy about 95% of the experience with this Android Wear watch is that there are apps on my watch, on my phone. They use this as a second display. And they once again try to figure out what is relevant right now. And I didn't even look at any instructions for 2 weeks. I just had these little joyful moments where I'm taking one of my 3 or 4 weekly constitutionals, and I've got my Android phone. I'm using Beyond Pod, and I'm just starting up a podcast. Okay, there you go. I'm putting this in my pocket and starting my walk, and I'm just checking the time. And I noticed that because this app right here is a podcatching app, and it knows that I'm connected to an Android Wear device. It figured out that I bet he's going to want to know what is playing right now and have transport control. So at the very, very bottom of this little watch face is now, here's the name of the podcast I'm listening to, and here's a pause play button. These things keep happening all the time, where if there's an app that's running that I've taken this out to do something, I don't have to enable a navigation app. I just simply have to use whatever app I'm normally using to navigate via the street from point A to point B. And when I do this, it realized that, I bet that it's relevant to have this information on this screen right here. So it's something that I almost never have to do anything, or excuse me, I rarely have to do anything to get access to functions. And once, as I've been saying, that one little molecule of data that I want when I do this, it works. The voice to text works great. The voice commands work great. There are even onboard apps that work great. But it really takes this act and makes it into something that's relevant to someone who walks around with a phone in their pocket. I've been babbling, so I will yield point number 3, and until and unless it is deemed necessary by the host to go into point number 3.
Okay, so I'll ask Adam and Jason. Are those, now we've kind of agreed, I think, that Andy's little molecules is a good idea. Are those kind of features things that would persuade you to, if you weren't in the business, persuade you toward a Moto or an Apple Watch or something?
Assuming I wasn't in the business, and didn't have any kind of other reason to do it, but that I had the same job in the sense of not leaving the house and sort of having all this technology surrounding me all the time, I would probably say no, just from the standpoint of it's hard to imagine there being anything on my wrist that is that much more important than something in my pocket when I'm in my house, or it's not on the computer in front of me. So, but again, I don't think, lots of people work at home, but lots more people commute and work at jobs where that kind of stuff seems vastly more interesting and more relevant. So I don't think for me it would be a big deal, but I do think for a lot of people, I'm not sure if this is exactly what Andy's, where the Moto's picking this stuff up, but the Google app on the iPhone has I think they call it Google Now, those little cards, and again, it doesn't usually do anything for me because I'm not leaving the house. But every time I pull up the Google app, I kind of look at those cards like, whoa, that's actually pretty good. If I was going to leave the house, it's going to give me directions, something where I might go. Or, it's telling me that an event's coming up that I might want to go to, but I'm not going. So, it's guessing. It's not guessing badly, but it's just not hitting me in particular.
Jason, how about you?
It's hard for me to say because I'm in this business because I love this stuff. And so, yes. That's why I got the Pebble and why I kickstarted it. It was not just, I'd like to explore the future of wearables, but also because I thought it was a cool idea. And I think it is a cool idea. And I think these little atoms, or molecules, it depends on if it's a chain of atoms or if it's a simple molecule. That's where the metaphor breaks down for me. But so they're a chain of Adam Engsts that are linked up and form a molecule. Thanks, Adam. So, yes, I think there is. It appeals to me. I walk around and listen to podcasts, and having controls on my wrist and seeing what's playing and all that appeals to me. Having navigation on there so that I know where I'm going and how long it's going to be until I get there without calling up an app appeals to me. I think the idea appeals to me. This is all about how it's finally ultimately made, and that's going to be whether it stands or falls. Does this stuff really work, or is it too soon for that? I like, look, we interface with the world with our senses, and sight is a really high volume way to get information, and so having something glanceable that's glanceable all the time instead of being tucked away in your pocket or in a bag is really good. I remember listening to who was it? It was one of the original Mac guys. Was it? It wasn't Andy Hertzfeld. It was Bill Atkinson at Macworld Expo talking about the prospect of having something that was a little bit of a prefiguring of Siri, but more than that, the idea of an intelligent agent that lives in your ear and that has GPS and that has a camera and knows where where your head is pointing, but can also tell you things, and a little bit like the movie Her. Except maybe with less of the phone sex. So for those who've not seen Her, that happens. Anyway, I think that sound is another way that other information can be imparted that is also intriguing. So this is early days on finding ways to do this, but I think it's all good, because the more we're able to just kind of move free and easy and be people, be humans, and still have really quick access to other kind of mediated information, it's going to be big in some way or other. And whether it, maybe the smartwatch thing isn't the right way, but there will be a right way.
I just saw there was Georgia Tech, some place in the South. The research group actually just did an app for Google Glass, where, let's say, you're hard of hearing, and you give your smartphone, presumably an Android phone, to someone else, and they talk into it, and the other person wearing Google Glass gets transcription in real time. Obviously kind of a proof of concept. You're not just going to be handing your smartphone to anyone to be able to talk into, and they didn't want to just have it kind of, the microphone on Google Glass is designed to pick up you, not other people. But nonetheless, I thought that was truly fascinating, because that's a situation, Google Glass gets a lot of flack for various things, but I find the concept tremendously interesting, because being able to see something that's relevant and relevant to the context is to my mind a really fascinating way for this technology to go. It's a little bit like what Andy's saying, the watch just knows what is appropriate to show him. Well, what if it was just popping up in the corner of your eye? That's even potentially more interesting as far as this kind of technology looking into the future. And so, no, I don't have Google Glass. I wasn't interested enough to try to get that. Again, not leaving the house so much, but I do think we're trying out all these different things, and I'm sure we're going to see someone who's going to put the Bluetooth headset in the ear and and talk to you to give you a lot of information that way as well. Someone's going to do it. I don't know if anyone's done it a significant way yet, but it's going to happen.
Well, at the same event where the Motorola launched the Moto 360, they also launched a earpiece. I think they're calling it the Hint. That is so tiny that you would not. I was, over the course of the day, 1 out of every 8 people I met at Motorola was wearing one, and I would not know until I circled around them and was actually I was actively
looking in their ears,
wearing them. Yeah. And it has one little touchpad, so that if you wanted to use it for Siri, you could use it for Siri. But when you have it hooked up to an Android phone, particularly a Motorola phone, it can do things like you and Jason were talking about, where you can just say, what is 20% of what is 120% of $21.31, and it will speak back to you that here's how much the tip is on that check you just got, and that's exactly what we're talking about. The problem with Google Glass was not. Was not the core idea. It was the fact that it was so visible. And so I think with a device like that earpiece, where you can wear it and it is not going to hinder your ability to go out inside the real world and be taken seriously, and this, which does not occupy any of your natural senses, but it keeps this kind of distracting device in a place where it really can't do any damage to you, which is right inside your pocket there. I'm just glad that we're seeing that the trend has always been for the past 5 years to try to take this big desktop computer and break it into tiny bits so that you only have to take the one little bit that you need with you at this moment, instead of being beholden to a laptop or being beholden to a tablet, and now without being beholden to an actual phone.
So guys, to wrap this up, because we could go on for hours.
Could we?
Yes, we could.
I've seen Mac Break Weekly. I know you can, Andy. I know it. It's been proven scientifically.
I got the Motorman's helper underneath this table. I'm good.
Would you tell developers, what would your advice be to developers? Do you think that they really need to be thinking hard right now about developing those molecules and even atoms for the Apple Watch to go along with their existing apps, or do they need to be? So is the Apple Watch going to be an accessory to the iPhone and iPad, or do you think it can be a standalone thing that people are going to develop apps just for that? Jason?
I think I would say don't think about taking your current phone apps and making them for the watch. Think about a great idea that you've had that you'd like to have on your wrist that's super simple, and build that. Because I think we're going to see a lot of really bad apps that are phone apps move to the watch, and it's going to be too complicated and too weird. And simple is the trick here. Try to keep it simple. Try to keep the interaction as simple as possible. Try to keep what it's for to, as one, focus on it. And this is in some ways the same lesson as taking Mac apps and making iPhone apps. It's like, don't make a Mac app on the iPhone. Make an iPhone app. And now it's like, don't make an iPhone app on the watch. Make a watch app. And that goes for all of these devices. That simple, start with a good idea for what you'd want on your wrist, not with existing code bases that you could move to somewhere else, because I don't think that works.
I was going to say the thing that I'm really kind of curious about is if Apple will actually what will appear in WatchKit, put it that way, in terms of encouraging developers, again, not to just try to shoehorn their app into this tiny little screen, but to say, okay, here are the kinds of things that we encourage you, because remember, you have to have an iPhone for an Apple Watch. Here are the kinds of things we encourage you to do in terms of having your app on the phone. Present information at useful times and useful ways, and again, hopefully they'll be doing the kinds of things that Andy was saying that the Moto X is doing, the 360, that that be able to provide information contextually, so that Apple will be hopefully bringing some of that information back and presenting it to the developer to do with as they see fit.
Andy?
I'd say that underscoring everything that Jason is saying, if you just try to simply say, "Oh, this is finally a chance to do Angry Birds on a watch," I think that anytime that you find yourself, yeah, exactly. Only now you have to get your gyrate around to make it work. Anytime you find yourself asking a user to spend a lot of time doing this, you're wrong. Back off and do it again. Find the one feature that find one thing that your app does that seems like it should be unnecessary to dig into a phone and unlock a phone in order to do it, and project that app into this watch face. Find a way to keep someone from having to dig out their phone, keep someone from having to make that sort of social error about having to do this just because they want to take a note, or so we've just made plans for lunch next week. I want to make sure I record it because I'm going to forget it in about 10 seconds if I don't do it otherwise. There are opportunities for individual apps, but mostly it's, again, an excuse to keep your phone in your pocket. One of the nicest things that I found for this Moto 360, I just discovered about 3 or 4 days ago, where at least if I'm going into a coffee shop to just do a little bit of work, I'm not using my phone. I'm just using it as a hotspot, and I have to turn it on. I have to unlock it. I've got to now dismiss a low battery warning, and now I've got to go into the whatever menu option is for turning on the Wi-Fi hotspot. Someone came up with this really cool app where all I have to do is swipe left, type one button, and now Wi-Fi hotspot is enabled on the phone. That's the sort of stuff that will make someone very, very happy that they gave you 99 cents for this app, and very, very happy that they spent $250 or $350 for a smartwatch.
Interesting. The Apple Watch as a control surface for the iPhone.
Yeah.
Interesting. Guys, this has been fun. We haven't done it in a long time. Thank you so much for being here. For better or worse, there have been some changes as to where some folks can find some of you. So let's go across and let everyone know where you can currently be found. Jason, we'll start with you.
I am found in the same place you can find me at sixcolors.com. You can find my pop culture podcasting at theincomparable.com. You can find my technology podcasting at relay.fm, and you can find me on Twitter all the time at jsnell.
Great. Glad that you've decided to up your game on so many of the individual projects now that you have a little more time.
Yeah, it's the idea. I would like to do this for a living, and so and after 17 years, I would kind of like to not do it inside a large corporation. So we'll see how that goes.
Good. Well, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you,
Andy.
I'm still at the Chicago Sun-Times. It's their technology columnist. So you can go to suntimes.com, or hopefully we're designing a new portal page for my stuff. So hopefully it'll be a little bit better organized, a little bit easier to find. You can go to my website, ihnatko.com, for other sort of stuff. I go to Twitter at Ihnatko to leave my fastball in the bullpen, so to speak. I'm also podcasting every week at MacBreak Weekly on the Twit Network. I've got the Ihnatko Almanac, which is my everything else I want to talk about on a weekly basis on the 5x5 network. And if Jason and I are in the same city, you will find us probably somewhere having a very, very thick red burger together.
Yep, that is accurate. I can co-sign that.
Unfortunately, Adam, as he's attested, never leaves the house. But if
you're ever in Adam's house,
if he left the house, yes.
When I do get to Boston, and I'm going to see Jason next weekend in Montreal at Singleton.
Yes.
So I do get out sometimes, and I will be wearing my Pebble then, because it's really useful whenever I go out.
And pardon me, Adam, of course, your vocation hasn't changed, but just for the sake of completeness.
Stuff never changes for me in some ways, it seems. Tidbits.com. So I've been doing it for almost 25 years. And TakeControlBooks.com. We've been going absolutely nonstop with books about Yosemite and iOS 8 that are in the works. They're not out yet, but neither is Yosemite, and iOS 8 we're still working on. So that's where you can find my stuff. And Twitter at Adam Engst. I don't actually spend vast amounts of time there, and I'm feeling really left out because I don't have like a podcast or 3 like the rest of you guys. So clearly I'll have to get on that. Jason, we'll talk next weekend.
You can come on my podcast anytime. Don't if you never leave the house physically, you can perhaps leave it emotionally. This is going to be the baby steps that will cause you to you don't need to be running for your life every time you leave.
I should be clear, I do not have an agoraphobia or anything here. It's just
what you do have is a lovely wife and a lovely child and a lovely piece of property on which to be. So if I had 2 out of 3 of those things, perhaps I would leave the house less than I do.
Yeah, what more does a man need? More does a man need? Well, guys, thank you again. We will do it again, hopefully a little more regularly than we have been.
Indeed.
So, I'm all for that.
Yes.
Great. Folks, of course, check the show notes if you didn't catch all of that. I'll have everything there in the bios so that you can find these gentlemen wherever they are, whenever it suits you. Until the next time.
You can track us via our watches.
Can track you. Yes. That's a whole nother discussion. We won't go there. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacNotables on MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at MacVoices.com/newsletter. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.